Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Speedrun Insider. My name is CJitsallGewd. Thank you all for listening. Your support has been overwhelming, your feedback has been received. We appreciate it, and it brings me great pleasure to read it all. Thank you for listening. I'm very excited to be able to do this podcast, and I'm very excited to introduce to you my guest for this week. He is the technical wizard from the wonderful land of NASA, the public domain pope, the one, the only, DarkAries. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm actually doing pretty all right today. Today's a good day. It's a Friday, so
Hey,
pretty
fry
good.
yay, right?
Yes.
Right. So, why don't you tell the people who you really are?
I am DarkAries. A lot of people call me Dan, uh, mainly because with some of us at NASA, we were on a first name basis already from real life, and that has kind of transpired to everywhere else. So I am DarkAries or Dan. Realistically, my actual name is Daniel because it's a Polish name, but it's spelled exactly the same. I do a lot of AV stuff, or at least used to before things kind of changed across the globe.
Mm.
And I help out with speedrunning events and also run speedrunning events. And as you mentioned with the public domain Pope, I also run a public domain Twitch channel.
Yes, you do. I'm very interested to talk to you about that towards the a little bit later in the program. I do want to just kind of right off the bat say publicly, out in the open, for the record of the history and the memory of the internet, thank you for helping us with SpeedDoxathon.
You're very welcome.
I know that we chained you to a table for some measure of time with the layouts and my poor designing and, all that fun stuff. So I appreciate it. It was a first time endeavor for us, so.
I was already chained to the table on my own will recently, so it's okay. It was just really, getting the most out of your money for that one. So
I I will blame Quo partially. Quo, I dubbed him the undisputed God King of telling me information that I need to know after I needed to know it. So he's like you should come up with a aesthetic background. So I do, and then afterwards, like a week after, he's like, yeah, but like all the boxes are wrong and misshapen and the text is not aligned. I'm like, well, come on, man. You told me to make something pretty. You didn't tell me to make it like like to the inch. I'm like, I'm not building a house. I'm painting a picture. So it was it was definitely a learning experience. We definitely needed a very kind shepherd to help us navigate the wilds of event planning, and we had a lot of experienced help. So shout out to everybody that volunteered for SStat and all the people behind the scenes that you didn't see too, because there really wasn't that many issues. Um, like technically speaking, I think most of the kind of problems we had were kind of runner side that we just couldn't do anything about. So
yeah, overall, me and Quill only had to troubleshoot one thing at like 4 a.m. in the morning because randomly things decided to break. But after that, it was smooth sailing for the rest of the event. So
it was fortuitous timing because we had two runners drop out during that time. So I believe we were doing a rhythm game showcase, and
yes.
so it was. It is a shame that no one will ever get to see the masterpiece of rhythm that was showcased by Dale and Grace. But I don't know if we're losing anything. It was special for the people that were there. We'll leave it
It's
at that.
You just had to watch it live. It's exclusive.
Yeah, exactly, right. It was a non-recorded run. It was only for the people in attendance, not for the millions watching at home. So I want to ask you how you discovered speedrunning and kind of when all this came into focus for you as like a hobby or as something that you would like put more and more energy into.
So I've had a different answer in the past, but as I've contemplated more and more things and I remember more and more of my past, that answer has actually changed. Technically, I actually started speedrunning in grade school because what happens is when I was in grade school, that was kind of the peak time of Newgrounds and Flash games and everything that was going on. And you would have mirrors of those Flash games onto different websites, which you would then learn while you're at home, then try to get working at school because proxies and this site is blocked because of gaming and different things like that.
Hmm.
And when you had a recess break or there was a library time where you were on the computers, what we would actually do in grade 4, 5, it was grade 5, we would actually speedrun as a bunch of me and my friends and everything. We would speedrun the Impossible Quiz. And when the
Oh,
Impossible Quiz 2 came out, we started speedrunning that too because it was a race to see which one of us could beat the game the fastest. So that's actually my first interaction with speedrunning. And then later on, when the Super Mario Brothers 3 video came out onto E-Bombs World and everything, where beat the game in 11 minutes, that was obviously viral. That was another interaction with speedrunning. My actual getting into speedrunning, the culture that it is now, with the community and everything else, was actually there was a Reddit post with the Ocarina of Time run from one of the older GDQs that went viral, where Narcissa Wright did the whole run and explained it and everything. There were still, only about 20, 30-ish people in the hotel and everything. And when that went viral, that was about the same time where Own 3D still existed. Twitch was just up and coming. One
yep.
league game would bring down the whole website. And that was when I started getting into speedrunning as a community. I got myself a Dazzle. I actually did a lot of NES Tetris speedruns on Speedruns Live. I did some Pokemon Stadium speedrunning, Pokemon Puzzle League, and that's kind of how I got into it as a community. And then when I got into where I am now, basically the first year of NASA, it was like, yo, show up. And I just kind of showed up and there was some technical problems and I kind of just asserted myself and started fixing things. And that's kind of just the way it is now.
So you were like, oh, I'll help, and then you were conscripted into service.
Essentially, yeah, there was really no staff for the first NASA event. Naglaria was just like, hey, you helped. Now you're staff. He basically picked out the people who helped out the most during that whole event and was like, would you like to help plan the next events? And that's what happened. There was actually a point where at the first NASA, there was a lot of technical issues, and I actually brought some of my own equipment from home with me, and I used that to kind of fix everything up. I kind of redid a lot of wiring and cleaned stuff up, and I did not sleep that night. So when my friend BB Forky and Montucky friends showed up, I was dead to the point where they showed up and they're like, "Oh, hey, Aries," and I was like, "Hey," and didn't even recognize who they were. After half an hour later, I went into the other room and I'm like, "I'm so sorry. I didn't even realize you were people."
They were figments of your imagination.
Yeah, so it's kind of an ongoing meme that I don't really sleep during on-site events because I'm just so engrossed in trying to make sure everything works correctly.
Hmm.
Recently, that's been getting a little bit better as I've been making things easier for myself. It gets easier for other people to take over and work on it. So
Right. So, you kind of get jumped into the NASA gang after attending the first event because you said there was no staff. Can you tell me about how the first event sort of came to be, or like how does this thing? It sounds like this very loose idea that kind of coalesces over
it
time.
was very loose and basically fast and furious. Basically, Naglaria wanted to do an event just to hang out with speed friends.
Hmm.
And then it actually got a lot of traction, mainly due to the fact that the only event that was kind of happening in the scene was GDQ. ESA was happening in Europe. There wasn't really so many marathons like we have now. There was just a
Hmm.
couple players. I believe there was it was probably still Crystals for Life at that point, but it was maybe transitioning into RPG Limit Break. I
Hmm.
remember right after as well, there was Midwest Speed Fest, that started up as well or had already happened. Everything it was that point in time in the speedrunning scene where it was accessible to create your own event
Mhm,
beyond GDQ, as GDQ had proven that you can do events in person.
mhm,
So Naglaria did a forum post on speedrun.com. A lot of people submitted. Um, there was so many people that submitted. There was actually a lot of people who were supposed to judge, and that had a whole travesty on it, as there were judges who didn't actually look at the speedruns themselves. They were just like, okay, accept, decline, accept. You know what? Decline all of
mm,
them. So that was a little bit of a travesty, but things got fixed up. A schedule was made, and a lot of people just kind of showed up. And it was because everyone was kind of a friend or had become a friend at that event, as it was very close knit. And the copious amounts of mafia happening in the casual room probably helped.
mhm.
Um, yeah, and everybody just kind of did a thing. And afterwards, it was like, well, this went well. Do we want to do another one? Yes. And kind of went from there.
Right. So interesting, to think of it because you're right. There are other speedrunning events, and they have a lot of I guess cachet. I'm thinking of ESA, which feels very much like if it were on this continent, it would be a seemingly better version of GDQ. It has its own problems. And then pace is a thing. Like they did two paces. They did one on site, and then they did the one online. There's no shortage of online events, right? Yeah, you named. I mean, there's like five going on this weekend. When I actually scheduled SpeedDoxathon, I tried to pick a weekend that I thought no one was going to be doing a marathon on, which was kind of a folly. I did kind of get a little sore when I saw somebody who announced their marathon like way after we did, kind of pick the same times, and that's that was just kind of like cockiness or inexperience or whatever, because there are only 52 weekends in a year, but it was still kind of like I don't know, like you're kind of biting off my style a little bit
Yeah.
here.
So back in the day, I think it was like kind of an unwritten rule where you would try to avoid other events, mainly because there weren't so many events that you definitely didn't want to overlap.
Hmm.
And there wasn't so many runners at the time as well. At least it felt that there wasn't, the scene was not very large, but it's literally impossible to not have an event be overlapping a different event, because it's so easy to just whip up, a streaming program, restream everything, and you now have an event of X amount of quality. So
Yeah, I will say that seeing how the soup is made a little bit has given me an appreciation for marathons way more now, and being able to kind of spot the ones that are doing things. I don't want to say poorly, because that feels very rude, but they're doing things very like quick and dirty, I guess is a better way to put it.
what's happening is you're now noticing the things that can be improved upon, which happens no matter what your job is, right? You know what is good, how to do it well, how to do it poorly when corners are cut. Now that you've gone through the whole marathon experience, you are now aware of these things. And now you're like, oh, that's not done the way that we did it. Or, oh, that's a different way to do it. I appreciate that way. Now you're cognizant of it all.
Yeah, it's like when you hear a word for the first time, and then you start hearing that word everywhere. It's like, oh wow, I'm really seeing this now. And we did a few like road to SpeedDoxathon streams beforehand, and the quality of those streams compared to the finished SpeedDoxathon product by Sunday and Monday was night and day. So I definitely have a huge appreciation to all the tech people out there who make the trains run on time. It definitely was an eye-opening experience, and being back in the kitchen was very stressful, especially with everyone running around, proverbially. Proverbially?
Well, it's even worse kind of in on an on-site event, right? Everything's locally. If there's no, well, this hasn't shown up or anything like that, because they're booked for that week. They're at the event.
Mm.
And all the equipment, it's already there. You potentially have spares. Everything's already pre-set up. But when it comes to an online marathon, you are doing the exact same setup essentially over and over and over again. But the person who is technically doing the setup is different every single run, as you're only coaching the person who's getting set up. It's very probable that you will encounter the same problem and have to fix it over and over and over again. But in doing that, you also learn how to quickly diagnose and fix that problem over and over and over again. So there's positives and there's negatives to having stuff like that.
Right. I had done live events like charity stuff. I've also done like studio environment things, but never like, wiring a set like a small studio for sound versus like wiring an event space for sound. Two different things. The extent of which I did a stadium thing where we had these repeaters, like these big repeating speakers, because you couldn't hear
Hmm.
the stage from the end, from by like the 50-yard line on the football field. You
Yeah.
couldn't hear the stage. So we had these repeaters, and the guy who set them up, he had no delay. And so it was weird. Sorry, there was delay, and it was weird hearing it because it was like you were hearing it and then you would hear it again. It was very bizarre. It was like jarring. And so we spent a lot of time trying to get
Yeah.
that problem resolved. Ultimately, we ended up setting up more repeaters at smaller distances, and
Well,
that ended up working better.
audio engineering is just such a crazy environment. I know that at work, there was actually a charity boxing event that we do called Pearl Gloves. And
Hmm.
I've helped on it twice where I was kind of in control of the video and streaming portion and all that. And just the amount of thought that goes into audio is insane because it, the speaker, it basically it's a triangle, right? The audio goes out. So if you have a room and you put speakers in them, you're going to end up with holes in the audio where you'll move around and something doesn't sound correct. So you need to map all the speakers in like a stadium or wherever you are to make sure that you don't have any holes in your audio and that the audio levels are also balanced. Because like in your stadium example, if you only had two speakers and that had to fill the whole stadium, the people in the front are going to be deaf after 2 minutes and the
Yep.
people in the back will be fine. So with the delays as well, there's actual math that's involved because now you have to calculate the speed of sound, how much that travels. Okay, well, now this is my distance. Well, now I know what the delay is going to be after some math that I don't even comprehend personally. And that's how you have to set everything. And it's amazing, but I'm not an audio guy, so I can just appreciate it and do the little bits that I do know how to do.
Right. It's all the empathy, right? It's like, wow, that's really hard. Thank you so much for doing that. But I'm not I'm not doing it. I
Yeah.
I'm not gonna dip my toe any deeper into that pool. Um yeah, but there was no broadcast at these events that I've done, like these outdoor 24-hour events or these like 3 kilometer walks or, like the fight for juvenile diabetes, right? Where you're like walking around this park. There was never a broadcast component to it. If anything, there was a radio station, and that was just out of a truck. You just plugged everything into the truck, and then, it worked, or the van, whatever it was. They had all the equipment pre wired in this van. So it's interesting. I think that, you know, a number of people, an uncomfortable number of people have asked if SpeedDoxathon will be an in-person event at some point. And the answer is maybe, but this feels the jump is scary. I don't know if it's actually harder than doing an online event. Like,
A lot of people would argue it's easier.
a lot of people would argue it's easier. Why do you say that?
So, like I was getting to with the fact that you're constantly essentially doing the setup over and over and over again, when you have an on-site event, right? I will bring my computer, I'll bring my microphones, the audio mixer, and everything like that. And it is set up once. So the only thing that changes is, let's say you're doing a run, okay? You put on the headset, we do some quick audio testing. The console, if we're going by the way that I do things, is already set up. It's already actually been tested during the previous run to make sure that we have video and the game is already plugged in and everything like that. You
Mhm.
just show up, pop it in the chair, put on the headset, quick audio test level. We test on different devices. We test on the speakers in the room because we're on intermission and the stream can't hear that. We test on our headphones. We test on some laptop speakers. Everything sounds pretty good. We're good. And then we just go on to the next run. Races get a little bit different depending on how you've organized and planned for them. But if we're just talking single runner over and over and over again, it is infinitely easier.
The gag being, you said earlier that you don't sleep at in-person events. So where is the line that makes it more difficult? I'm hearing both sides of this basically. I'm hearing like, well, I don't sleep. I'm pretty sure you slept. I'm
So
sure you had
there
the good.
there is the reason for the fact that I don't sleep, quote unquote, is that there's nobody else to do the tech.
Oh,
So for example, the place where it all every single event that this would keep happening, there's only me, those crazy guys, Lurk, that are essentially guaranteed to run tech. We don't do shifts or anything. It's basically, okay, go to bed. Oh, you woke up? Well, I'm tired. I'm going to go to bed now. And we would rotate between the three of us, as nobody really knows how to run an audio mixer or how to use an Extron Crosspoint video matrix, which was amazing because there was an event that we did right after the first NASA, which was uh, DreamHack Montreal, where we did it as a kind of collab thing with No Reset.
mhm.
And I had to purchase a lot of equipment to make our lives easier because after the first NASA event, I knew where the weak points were and I did not want to go through that. So I purchased some video equipment and everything. The problem was by the time that video equipment showed up on my doorstep and I picked it up, the event was like 2 days away. So I was the only person who quickly learned how to use that equipment. So I couldn't even get anybody else to really operate because that would now be eating into our time and cause further delays. So that whole event, I basically had to operate solo, and I slept on a beanbag underneath the table at DreamHack. And then going forward, I get to sleep more as I get to train those crazy guys and lurk and everything like that. I get to sleep more, but there's still only X amount of people who actually know how to run and operate things.
Right. Well, that makes sense. You guys were all set to do an event in Cleveland this year, or I guess what year? In 2020, and that kind of got stopped by the COVID thing. I don't know what that experience was like for you. I was interested if you could kind of talk to me about it because I imagine a lot of people kind of face this problem where it's like we can't have an event now, right?
Yeah, and it's very interesting because I actually work in kind of hotel conferences. That's my job. I have a hotel that I'm based out of. I work for an AV company that's contracted in that hotel, and events kind of come in there. So I actually got to see both sides of it, people booking and people who have to provide the venue and everything.
Hmm.
And at first, when COVID happened, it's like, oh, we've had other pandemics before in North America, swine flu and all this other stuff, right? Um, just a lot of different uh, viruses and everything that's gone on. And I don't remember there ever really being a problem. I never had school canceled when these were happening. There wasn't massive closures or anything like that. I know
Right.
from a venue portion, I've been told that during the whole SARS pandemic, the companies were trying to stay safe and weren't doing conferences really, but the world didn't really shut down. It was just them taking precautions. So for us, we actually try to find a venue ahead of time, almost a full year if possible.
Mhm.
And in this circumstance, we had to work with some people as none of us personally live in Cleveland. So we had some trusted sources to look at the venue, send us videos and pictures as we emailed back and forth with the hotel venue ourselves. And I know for a fact that basically in any business, guaranteed money is always better than no money. So we
Right.
kind of just waited out the whole thing. And as we saw that, okay, the border's closed, it is still closed. This event literally will not happen because half of us can't even get inside the country and things are getting worse. We just asked, hey, can we postpone this to next year? And almost instantly in the course, relatively, it's not like we're waiting a week or anything like that. Maybe a day or two, responded back with, yeah, we are totally okay with postponing your event till next year. So it
That's
it was
that.
more just waiting.
Yeah, that's actually great to hear. There were I work for a dealer, and the manufacturer has these like quarterly meetings, and they rent out like a hotel, and you go up there for the night, and they have a dinner in the restaurant, and then they have a talk, and you're with the people from you talk to the people from the manufacturer, and they pretend to care, and you pretend to care. And I remember that the hotel actually stuck them with the bill and was like, they couldn't go, they had to cancel. And they were like, we do 3, 4 of these a year with you. And the hotel was like, no, we want our money. You booked the room. We couldn't book the room to anyone else. And I'm in New York, and it got bad here quick. We got shut down pretty quickly. So it was like, really, I'm glad that your experience was a lot different than my, the manufacturer, because it was like, sort of like that line from Goodfellas, like "F you, pay me." You
Yeah,
know.
I think in our case it did help that half of NASA staff is Canadian and we literally could not cross the border. I
Mhm.
know that there's a lot of dealings with like the force majeure clause that only comes into account when the government literally locks down or there's like a natural disaster or something. So, depending on the area and how things are worded, a hotel or venue or anybody can really be an asshat and be like, well, this isn't really force majeure. So, yeah, you got to cough up the money. I think in our case, as we literally could not show up to our own event, they would have rather just postponed it till next year.
Yeah, I mean, whenever you can, as a business, as a manager at a business, you never want to burn a customer. It's always better to cost yourself, you know, cost yourself money today, make your money tomorrow. It's always
Exactly.
the way to do it. And people remember that. I mean, you guys might use them beyond next year because you're gonna remember that they worked with you. You know, that's just needless speculation on my end, but I think people kind of value that stuff. I would actually really love for you. We talked a little bit about the tech before, and I kind of want to know if you could peel back the curtain just a little bit and tell the people what really goes in, because I think it's really interesting what really goes into doing, a marathon. In our case, the SpeedDoxathon type thing, right? Like the online marathon. If you could like talk about the tech stuff involved there, talk nerdy to me and all that.
Oh, I'll talk nerdy.
I love it. Go for it.
So the SpeedDoxathon was ran on a system that I personally call Sirena, or people call Siren, as I just named it for the Polish word for a siren,
Mhm.
because the main NASA computer is called Artemis, as I'm just a big fan of mythology, so I like to keep a consistent naming theme.
Mhm.
Artemis is a Greek god. A siren is just kind of a creature. They're not really godly or anything, but they're not human.
Mhm.
So Serena is kind of our smaller restream server. It's just a little Dell Optiplex with a Core i7 4770 and a NVIDIA 1050 graphics card. The whole big part of that is that the streaming and encoding portion is done on the graphics card, as the previous generation and current generation of NVIDIA graphics cards are actually pretty competitive with streaming from a regular CPU, but you don't have to use the CPU for it. So it opens up just more options as the computer isn't so encumbered by trying to do all that. And that server sits in those crazy guy's apartment building where he has access to gigabit internet. And that way, there's no problem of not having the internet capacity to restream. I know a lot of events do the whole thing, and we used to as well, actually. Okay, you're a restreamer. That person's a restreamer. I'm a restreamer. Okay, my shift is done. I'm going to hit stop streaming. You're going to hit start streaming. Hopefully, we timed it correctly so the stream doesn't drop. Oh, it
Hmm.
dropped. Well, now there goes half our viewers. We don't do that anymore. The idea actually came from Speed Souls, where they used a cloud gaming computer to run OBS and everything. But I don't have the money or connections to do that. So I just kind of grabbed my older graphics card. I bought a Dell Optiplex for like 200 Canadian off eBay and built that. And that's kind of like my budget cloud streaming service. And it works because it's set up in a way where anybody can kind of go in and understand what they're doing. OBS is OBS. If you stream, you understand where all the buttons are. And the backgrounds and everything like that are actually based off of Node CG and Zotan's Node CG speed control bundles, which is it's a kind of package for the graphics where you can import a Hararo and it puts all the runners, the game, the category, the Twitch into little variables, which then I take the time and effort to make little web pages out of that have all the text and everything where they're supposed to be on the images that you provided. And that way, when you click a button in the Node CG dashboard, it magically updates all the needed information on that. So instead of editing text files and making sure you got all of them, and you don't edit them beforehand and hit save, or it'll change in the middle of a run, or window capturing live split, people don't have fonts installed or they didn't work. It is just all there, hit a button, and you're good to go. There's a lot of pre-effort that goes in, but it makes the final product a lot easier for restreamers and anybody who's controlling the stream.
Yeah, absolutely. I I I'm not a very technically savvy person, but by the end of it, I had a pretty good command of everything. I didn't end up doing any restreaming, but yeah, it was definitely. I mean, I can see how and appreciate how like there has been work that has gone in to make this easier for everybody.
Yeah, and that's at the end of the day, that's what I always try to do whenever I am told of a weak point or I personally notice a weak point or something that people didn't really grasp. I try to work on that. So actually, one of the big things for NASA, since it was all online, is personally a big weak point in people's streams is audio. So I took the time to create a guide where it's like, okay, well, if you have this type of microphone, you should angle it like this. If you have a headset, you should put it like this. If you want to go through the process of doing a little bit of filtering, make sure you have a noise gate or some noise suppression if you have a massive fan in your room because it's the summertime and everything like that. And I tried to explain that as much as I could to the restreamers. And it
Hmm.
seems it stuck with Quo because he went through the process of making a whole YouTube video to help with people like, hey, you have a microphone. Follow these steps that I'm going through. And I'm very happy about that. As in watching videos online, nobody cares about the video quality, unfortunately, as much as I would care about the video quality because you don't always look at it. You can look away, multitask. The important part is audio. And if you sound like absolute garbage, nobody's going to want to listen to you.
Yeah, I think it's like in people's minds without having thought about it too much. It might like the expectation might be reversed. But I mean, if something has like halfway decent audio, I'll put up with 160p. You know, it's just like okay, I'm here for like what is the content of the video. You can't get that from just, you know, the visuals.
Exactly.
Some of the time. Yeah. There's a great I've talked about it on the podcast before. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but there's a great thing I call the Maury Povich problem. So you're like in like a service center, like a Sears, or I guess they don't have Sears anymore. You're getting your car fixed, and on the TV, because in the waiting room there's a TV, and every TV in every waiting room at every car place in America has like Maury Povich on, which is like, you know, just or Jerry Springer, like the trash TV problem. the trash TV genre. So either you have to know what's going on without being able to hear it, or you have to be able to tell what's going on by hearing it but not being able to see it. Which is why Maury Povich works so well, or Jerry Springer, where they get up, they throw the chairs. You know, they have like the little text at the bottom. It's like, yeah, he's not your baby's daddy, or whatever. So, it has to pass the Maury Povich test. I think people are willing to put up with far more on the video side than they are on the audio side.
I would agree.
So speaking of audio and video, you are at least partially behind a Twitch channel, which I really like, called Public Domain Cinema. And I was hoping you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting how this Twitch channel started up. It's ran by me and Lurk. Lurk is also NASA staff, and this is just kind of like a side project that we decided that we would do.
Mhm.
And the backstory to this is that we wanted to have kind of just a Twitch channel that airs content all the time. And we both like TV and movies and everything like that. So public domain really works. But I was also looking into a method of having videos just play 24/7 without needing to actually have an OBS open or watching the computer all the time. It would just be a background service. So we
Mhm.
combined those two ideas together to create public domain cinema, PD cinema. Sometimes we do offshoot streams where we'll provide our own commentary onto movies and such. The one that we did and people can watch is for My Man Godfrey, which is one of my favorite movies on the Twitch channel there. And in general, it's just an amazing movie. And we kind of just talk through it. There's also a lot of different content. And we curate it ourselves because there's obviously a lot of garbage as well in the public domain. So we try to keep things as much quality as we can and more interesting content at least.
Yeah, I think that people are not that aware of the public domain in the first place, but kind of because copyright law is like super garbage, and it's like meant to protect corporations and not like individual creators. You know, I do kind of like really love when things kind of slip into the public domain. I think one of like the famous examples, and I think it kind of lives in a weird place, is "It's a Wonderful Life," which I think a movie that a
Yes.
lot of people know. I don't actually know that movie's specific situation, but it is technically in the public domain, right?
So this is how companies have been trying to avoid having their content in the public domain. The video portion itself is in the public domain, but then people will copyright the story that it's based on, and that is in copyright. So you, even though the movie itself would be public domain, the story that is based off is copyright, or the soundtrack itself is copyright. We have a couple movies that we wanted to have on the channel and were on the channel at first, but we had to kind of get rid of them due to those kind of legal issues. For
Mhm.
example, McClintock is a movie starring John Wayne that's in the public domain. But the
One of my
problem is
favorite movies of all time.
the John Wayne estate has the whole soundtrack in copyright. So the video itself and the dialogue and everything would be public domain, but the music in that movie is under copyright. So you really can't air it unless you completely replace the soundtrack. And that is the case actually for a lot of public domain movies. And actually newer releases of public domain content for silent movies, for example, the orchestral soundtrack that is created, well, that's brand new. So that is now under copyright, even though the previous content is in public domain. And for a while, there was actually a whole thing where people thought, well, if I restore the content, this is now copyright because I worked on it and restored it. That's actually not true due to some American laws where if you are restoring it to its original condition and not adding in anything extra, it does not actually constitute to get a brand new copyright. But if you did a couple changes, like let's say colorize the movie that was super popular back in the day, well, now that movie's back in copyright. So that's why there was a whole era where the companies were colorizing all their black and white movies. because even if the copyright ends on the black and white copy, they just don't have to keep it in print, only keep the copy version or the colored version in print. And now they still have a stranglehold on that movie. So there's a lot of interesting things that go on when you start looking at copyright.
Yeah, absolutely. Copyright is, I kind of alluded to my opinions on it before. It's a perverse version of what it was originally intended to be, right? It's like designed to protect the IP of creators while they're still alive, but now it is just like a like gross twisted version of that where it's just like, oh, in perpetuity, basically infinity minus a day. The Walt Disney Corporation owns the rights to Mickey Mouse. It's like Walt Disney's not getting any more money. You literally cannot compel him to draw another cartoon, sort of by the fact that he's dead.
It's kind of interesting. I mean, there's definitely also copyright versus trademark. For example, the channel actually airs some public domain Superman cartoons that were created by the Fleischer Studios back in the day, which is now defunct. I think Paramount technically owns all the rights to their stuff, but the Superman cartoons are actually in public domain. But if you wanted to do anything with Superman, that is in copyright because that's like a trademark type deal going on. So
Mm.
even though that specific content is in public domain, that doesn't necessarily mean that now Superman is himself is in the public domain. It is only that specific content that would be in the
Yeah,
public
that
domain.
one specific use of Superman is in the public domain, but not the likeness of Superman. It's all, I could go on all day about it, but as my dad always said, I'd complain, but who'd listen?
Yeah, the only kind of frustrating part is that we have to adhere to American copyright laws, or at least we're adhering to American copyright laws,
Mm-hmm.
as there is actually content that is public domain in other countries, but not public domain in the States. For example, there's a lot of content that is now copyright or in the public domain in Canada, in the UK, but it's still in copyright in the States. So we can't have it on the channel, as we're pretty sure with Twitch being in the States and most of its audience being American, that it's not going to fly really well. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, America's the home of the free, right? The free to be gouged.
yep.
Unreal. One of the things that people have talked a lot bit about on this show with people that I've interviewed and people that have come to me and talked to me is that they personally want there to be another. They're not happy with GDQ, right? For whatever reason that may be. They're unhappy with the current establishment, I guess, of what they are perceiving as mainstream events. So I guess my question for you is in two parts. The first part is I don't think in size, at least I could be wrong, but I don't think in size that NASA is a direct competitor. So I guess my first question is, can it be? Like, is NASA an alternative to GDQ? And give you a chance to explain your reasoning or why. And then my second part of the question is, what is it in your approximation that GDQ is doing that's alienating so many people?
All right, so let's start with the first part of the question. Is NASA I guess, replacement for GDQ? And the answer is going to be no. I think a
Mhm.
lot of people get mixed up in that GDQ is now a charity event that happens to raise money via speedrunning. NASA, up until this year, was just a speedrunning event. There was no charity portion tied into it. There is now, as we kind of solidified our tech and how to run an event and everything like that. So we are comfortable bringing in a new element that has a lot of logistics behind it because, for example, those prizes, there's laws against that because otherwise it'll be considered a lottery or gambling. That's why, for example, with GDQ, there's fine print where you can actually send in a postcard and it's a free entry. You don't have to pay. And that happens for a lot of giveaways. Otherwise, it's actually considered gambling if there's no free option to enter in. And that is
Mhm.
also why none of those prizes are immediately announced. There's a waiting period because they have to wait for those free ballots to come in. So there's a lot of logistics actually on the charity side if you're trying to raise money. And with that size and everything, GDQ's priorities have obviously changed. It's no longer the 20, 30 people in a room that happen to speedrun, and it's pretty cool because they're raising money. It is now full on PCF, Doctors Without Borders, and all these other charities. They go up to them and they're like, hey, we want to contract you to run an event to raise funds for us. That's how that process works now. And they've been
Mhm.
pretty transparent about it. NASA is not like that. We are very much a speedrun event, show up, have fun, and we're going to be raising money for some cause on the side. That's not to say we won't put an effort into it. There's actually a lot of effort that I personally try to put in. I know that everybody who was a volunteer for NASA 2020 very much knows that I have a lot of ideas that just weren't possible because of the fact that it was an online event. But in person, I would like to do a lot of things to really drive home that it's raising money for a charity and you're not just sending money into the void, as I
Mhm.
take inspiration from other very successful charity events. And actually, in high school, I actually have the plaque for me right beside my TV where I was given an award for pilgrimage as I went to a Catholic high school, and pilgrimage was where people would raise funds to then walk from our high school to downtown, and that money went to our sister school in Guatemala, I believe. So raising money for a charitable cause is not a foreign concept to me. It's very much ingrained in me actually, and that's not the focus of the event. The event is for people, specifically speedrunners and people in that scene, to show up and have fun, and we're just raising money for the side, but also turning that into fun. And that is what people, I think, aren't grasping with GDQ. Their priorities have changed. They now have 2,000 people who show up to an event. There is obviously growing pains with that, but their focus has changed. It is no longer speed friends get together for speed runs for the stream. This stream is specifically made to grab as much money as possible from the people watching to give it to the charity.
Right.
And to refresh my memory, what is the second half of the question?
So the second half of the question is, by your approximation, what is GDQ doing explicitly that is kind of alienating a lot of people?
I think what they're specifically doing is what a lot of people would just term as CYA, cover your ass.
Hmm.
When you have such a GDQ is not small. Let's not kid ourselves. They are very large. They are some form of entity that has taxes involved, and they get paid large amounts of money and deal with large amounts of money that go directly to a charity. And there's 2,000 people who show up to their events. Actually, probably more, as that's only registration. That doesn't take into account any extra people who show up from the charity themselves or any of the sponsors or anything like that.
Hmm.
So when you have that many moving pieces, you want to make sure that nothing goes wrong. And in wanting to make sure that nothing goes wrong, you are in a tunnel vision kind of mode where you will not see or ignore the things to the left and right of you that can potentially cause issues as you're focused only on making sure that goes right. And like I alluded to in the previous half of the answer, their focus as an event has changed. That focus hasn't been realigned with the people who show up to the event. Plus, the fact that they're trying to make sure that they don't screw up, as it's very easy to have one thing go wrong, and all of a sudden that is your entire reputation.
Hmm.
And we've seen this with GDQ, where they did a very messy public banning of two specific people that I don't need to mention, as people will probably easily figure out what situation this is. But that was a very messy situation. However, they were only trying to do right by the people who reported that situation and to make sure if those people should be banned or not. They probably shouldn't have publicly done it, but realistically, massive amounts of people were asking them for an answer. They just too hastily made an answer in trying to get to the bottom of it as quickly as possible. And that happens. People make mistakes. The problem is they have such a large following that if they literally step a millimeter off the line, they are now in trouble. And it's kind of a problem with social media and everything. I mean, NASA itself has had some grievances online as well that we've had to deal with for people not understanding context or anything like that. But it's a really fine line, and it's not an easy job. Anybody who wants to kind of bash GDQ, I welcome you to take their spot and see if you can do a better job. If you do, that'll be awesome. But probably most people, keyboard warriors on Twitter, probably will not. You yourself actually mentioned, wow, there's so much that goes behind the scenes of a marathon. A lot of people think that a marathon is just, click stream. How hard is that? I do that all the time to Twitch. Well, why is your stream not as big as theirs then? Clearly there's something going on there. And a lot of people think that NASA likes to bash GDQ or other events. That's inherently false. We just have different viewpoints on how to do an event. But that's the original event NASA won. Neglaria was in talks with Cool Matty asking, hey, this venue kind of screwed us on their internet speeds. They lied about it. Have you ever dealt with this? What do we do? So there is some talking back and forth that happens with marathons. Marathons don't hate other marathons. It just doesn't help anybody.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
yeah, for GDQ, what they could do better is just to kind of maybe think a little bit more before they talk and maybe realize that, covering your ass is great and all, but if it's starting to hurt, you maybe should rethink about how you cover your own ass.
Mm. I think too that they've sort of been insulated by the discontent of people, because there's no shortage of people that are into speedrunning. It's grown almost multiplicative every year since I joined, and I started in 2017 when it was already kind of big. So I think that they may be kind of pushing people away, but as many people as they push away, 3 more take their place. There's no shortage of people that want to go to GDQ. So it's like,
If you take a look at the Twitter threads where kind of essentially everything always boils down, it's always some sort of Twitter thread where somebody starts something up and it gains traction. If you take a look at the amount of likes and retweets and comments on that tweet thread, and then compare it to the amount of viewers that they actually get on their stream, it is very much a vocal minority that is handling all of these grievances. Not to say
yeah,
that the grievances aren't warranted, because at times they are warranted. No, let's not kid ourselves. Um, there are grievances that are warranted. Like, for example, when you invite somebody to your event and then at the event ban them from showing up on stream, that's all within the span of a couple days. That's really whack, and somebody really should have rethought things there to not make things look really suspect. But a lot of the times these things happen and it is a vocal minority. The amount of people watching the actual stream, they don't go to Twitter, they don't go to our speedrun or wherever, they don't go to the different Discord servers, they don't interact with speedrunning in that way. They just watch it because it's the front page on Twitch and they know it happens every so often and it's kind of advertised to them as such. They don't really care about all that. They don't know who this speedrunner is or who that speedrunner is or who kind of runs it. They're just like, oh, cool, video games. Oh, I played that back in the day on my Nintendo. Yeah, that's what maybe I have that in the attic. That's the majority of their audience.
yeah, for sure. We see that a lot with, obviously we work on SpeedDox, and the Coca-Cola of the mainstream, consumable speedrunning content genre is Summoning Salt. And I think a lot of his viewers are like that. They see them, like, he caught fire at some point, obviously. And that it's been downhill running ever since for him, but I think a lot of his viewers are they're more casual and they don't care about like what it is. They're happy to see content from him, and he makes good stuff. We kind of get the same rap where people think that we hate summoning salt, kind of the way that people think that NASA just bashes on GDQ. It's like, well, no, but you always think you wouldn't be doing it if you didn't think you guys could be doing something different or better, right? And I definitely get this from you. You are a person that is trying to improve on a process and try to make it easier and better every time. I'm the same way. I'm like, I'm not doing another event. I'm not doing another video unless we're going to grow from it and do it bigger, badder, better than ever. So I think people are, and this is part of the problem, I guess on the internet in general, but maybe more recently in speedrunning, is people just take a difference of opinion and they just run with it as you don't like each other. Or you disagree ideologically, so you can't exist. Like oil and water, Democrats and Republicans, cats and dogs. You can't get along. You hate each other. It's like, I never even met the guy. I
Yeah, I
haven't
mean,
said 2 words to him. You know?
personally, one of the things for me is that I really don't care about your viewpoint so long that you can actually argue your viewpoint. Personally, I really dislike when somebody gives a viewpoint and they cannot actually defend their own viewpoint. It's just something they read online with little info and that's their whole ideology. I'm not a fan of that. I need you to be able to defend your viewpoint when I bring up these points, those points. And if you can successfully defend your viewpoint in a way that I just don't think you're full of crap, then you can have whatever viewpoint you want. You know, I'll still not have the same viewpoint, but I now respect your viewpoint because you told me why you think that way, and that's what I appreciate about it.
Yeah. Being able to like explain why you think the way you do, even if I disagree, I'll respect that you have an informed opinion on something. Yeah, far too many people just kind of fall into the trap.
Like even in a marathon sense, for an AV sense, right? NASA is the only marathon that doesn't really deal with scaling or anything like that. All of the video from the consoles, they go direct into these very specific. They're not even capture cards; they're in the frame grabbers category, where you don't need fancy OSSEs or frame meisters and retro tinks and all that stuff. It is a completely different system, which leads to an easier time setting it up, at least in my viewpoint, and the potentially even a better video because now you have a lot more flexibility with the scaling process and everything like that. But I'm not going to call people who use OSSEs and other scalers and everything like that idiots. There's multiple ways to skin a cat, and if the results are good, then who's to complain? The viewer doesn't care about how you do it. As long as things look good and sound good, they don't care.
Yeah. All those people watching on Twitch every GDQ are happy to see a professional looking broadcast.
Exactly.
Well, I do want to wrap up. I wanted to thank you for being on the show. This was really interesting, working on the marathon, having all of the experience and the help from everybody was terrific. And, we are looking forward to doing another event at some point in the future. It definitely wouldn't have been possible. So I'd like to thank you again. You are welcome back anytime that you want because this was a great conversation. And I want to shout you out a few places really quick. If you want to follow DarkAries after this podcast, you can follow him on Twitter at DarkAriesKnight. That's Knight with a K, like Galahad and Lancelot, not like Knight like the Night Knight. He does some really cool stuff on his Twitch, twitch.tv/stream_science. So I think you used to do YouTube for that, and
So
this is good.
I used to just kind of regular stream speedrun stuff, but a lot of complaints with NASA events is like, I don't know how to operate stuff. So now I've been slowly just streaming my knowledge for others to share.
Great. The man loves to give back to the community. And speaking of NASA, you can follow NASA on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/NASAMarathon. On Twitter, at NASAMarathon. They have a YouTube channel. You can go search for NASA Marathon. You'll find it pretty easily. And their website, nasamarathon.com. I think we rounded the bases there. And if you want to check out the public domain cinema, currently playing is The Front Page, which is a movie, I believe, which mainly takes place in one room. I think there's a short car chase at some point in this film. But yeah, 24/7 copyright-free films, serials, and cartoons. If you want to check it out, really cool stuff. I mean, it's free, right? Just come in, hang out, watch it. Pretty cool stuff. That is PD Cinema. So that's twitch.tv/PD Cinema. I think I've plugged everything for you. Did I forget anything?
No, that's about it.
Alrighty, the man has a man of many talents, he's a man of many skills, he's a jack of many trades, and a master of a select few of them. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Aries. This was a pleasure. Or Dan. Do I know you well enough to call you Dan now?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Alright, Dan. Well, listen, thank you again for being on. Thank you, everybody who's been listening. You can download the podcast. You can listen to us on Spotify, Amazon Podcast, Google Podcast, coming soon to a iTunes near you. We also upload it every week on YouTube. You can look for Speedrun Insider on YouTube, find the page. All the episodes go up there right along with the release on the audio platforms. If you want to be notified the second a video comes out, the best way to do that right now is to go on to our Discord, the SpeedDox Discord. We'll give you a role, you'll get added the second an episode is uploaded. It's just that simple. Thank you, everyone. Keep that feedback coming in, keep those comments coming in, keep on listening, keep sharing it with your friends. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time on Speedrun Insider.